journalist for a long time. You come from a very prominent business family. You know your shtick, no? And you know you have lots of personal contacts. You know a lot of people very intimately. You ran one of the most influential magazines, lifestyle, politics, Latin cover me. But today I want to really focus on the economics of what's happening in the country. So, Apa, I don't know if you caught yung conversation ko with Dr. Lisandro Claudio the other week on his upcoming book, no, which was really this discussion about the corruption discourse in the Philippines,
Yeah.
and how that does not necessarily capture the full story, no. But having
Mhm.
said that, I think it would be a disservice to our faiths and to our nation and to the business community not to take into consideration yung epekto ng corruption. So pwede natin pag-usapan na, Apa, ano po yung perspektibo ng business community? At least a business community you are familiar with, you come from, again, in your own private capacity, dito sa issue ng flood control corruption. Are things getting worse than, I don't know, PDAF days, than all of the Marcos Sr. dictatorship, corruption days? Ano mang level ng corruption natin and how worrying it is from a business standpoint?
Well, I'm also a member of a group called the Philippine Budget Watch.
Right,
It's a coalition of different, and
right.
the churches in there and academe and so on, and they have actually made graphs showing the rise of corruption um, since I guess the Pinoy era.
Right,
No, even the Gloria era.
right.
No, how much
Of course.
the volume of corruption is,
Yeah,
and it's a steady rise. But during Duterte, there was a spike.
right.
You know, there was a spike. There was a big jump. Formally is the tip of the iceberg. As far as that's concerned. Um, is corruption worse under Marcos? No, it's just as bad. The level of corruption. Now, when we talk about corruption, as business people, we're oriented. Our goal is to create value for stakeholders. Okay, and that takes several forms. Profit is the most obvious one,
Right.
but utility is another one. Even if you're a property developer or whatever, you want to provide people with good homes, with good malls, with lots of options. You know, for instance, so these are the kinds of value that we want to build. Corruption not only doesn't create value for stakeholders, it basically takes value away from the
Right.
stakeholders. It steals it, right? And that's the gross economic effect of this. And then, of course, you have the corruptos, the corrupt officials and contractors spending their money on things like Rolls Royces, right? Imported
You
goods.
mean the one with the
So
umbrella and Hermes letter? That variety?
yeah, I mean, I'm just using that as an example, you know, um, and that's money that
Could have gone, yeah.
effectively has left the local economy. You
Right.
know, it's it's sad, but uh, the net effect is very corrosive
Yep.
to the economy, and of course, government efficiency and so on. You know, government spending, by the way, is a huge driver of the economy, of the economy. Um, it creates jobs. You know, these flood control projects, yeah, they created jobs. So they created
You
some
mean
value for the economy.
for those doing inspirational videos? Okay, before we go with Ronald Llamas, sorry, I was literally with Ronald Llamas kanina discussing the General Torres situation dun sa with sila Ses Trilon dun sa show natin. So sorry, I'm still in the afterglow of yung kalokohan namin ni Ronald. Um, But there are two things you mentioned that I want to go back to, right? So one is, oh, by the way, there was corruption under Duterte apparently. Why? Because one of our fellow Baguio friends who was very much into good governance championship nowadays, parang hindi niya masyadong pinag-usapan yung mga flood control projects, 11,000, 12,000 under Duterte, Farmali, etc. So I thought maybe as the other Baguio boys, we want to mention that. But the other thing I want to also mention is the varieties of corruption, right? Because there's a lot of good literature nowadays, especially in response to the whole Acemoglu, inclusive institution literature. Na actually, if you look at the case of China nowadays, and even Vietnam more recently, and back in the day, South Korea, Japan, well, Korea hanggang ngayon, di ba? I mean, you don't have to watch Parasite. I mean, the corruption levels are quite high in these countries. One MDB, we can talk about Malaysia. But the corruption in these countries is what you call access corruption. So this is the kind of corruption that allows for businessmen, conglomerates to get business going and create jobs and create high technology companies. So may nangyaring kalokohan pero ano siya, efficient siya in the sense that it creates economic productivity. And then there's this corrosive corruption na pumupunta sa, I don't know, inspirational videos daw, na pumupunta sa Hermes leathered Rolls Royce with an umbrella. So this is the one that goes to the Swiss bank and Cayman Islands. So corruption is bad, but there are levels of corruption. And in fact, interestingly, there's some scholarship on the case of China, for instance, that shows certain form of corruption actually accelerate economic growth. So I think those are two things I want to go back to. So una, pero natin balikan yung issue ng, you were just saying that, well, corruption at worst is just as bad as Duterte era. How come a lot of our good champions of good governance ay parang biglang hindi na nila pinag-usapan yan? In fact, you had Sara Duterte the other day saying, ayan, investigate to mga congressman na yan. And may nagsabi, may kilala kong congressman na medyo malapit sa'yo, baka may gusto rin tignan yung flood control. Can you talk about that, the Duterte era concerns with good governance, before we go to what's happening under the BBM years? Because there's an accusation that a lot of us daw, us in whether business community, academia and all, masyado daw tayo mabait kay BBM. But my point is, it's not whether we like BBM or not. We're just making reference juxtaposition, and in many ways, it's at worst just as bad. Kaya ako, I really didn't appreciate when some of our friends just swashbuckling friends of ours na biglang lumitaw, sinasabi nila, this is the worst budget ever, this is the worst ever. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, I think I've seen worse, right? In the past 20 years or so. Apa, you want to discuss that? Like, what should be our approach to understanding corruption? Should we look at the past 2 or 3 administration? Kasi kung ano lang to, cyclical lang to, admin to admin lang to, di ba napopoliticize lang tong issue ng corruption?
Problem since the Philippines was a commonwealth. Okay, I mean it's always been a problem. In fact, the kind of U.S. democracy that we inherited was arguably that of the sort of what they call the Tammany Hall type of
Gangs of New York style, yeah, kind of boardwalk
yeah.
empire, yeah.
Yeah, lots of pork barrel, no, and I mean, that's always been our problem. Okay, infrastructure, I suppose has always been subject to some corruption, but in many cases, the projects do get built, right, and they get built to a reasonable standard. But in flood control, there's a lot of ghost projects.
Yeah.
Projects that are funded, paid for. There was a bidding and everything, but nothing got built, right? And flood control is really
ghost project
focus for these guys because there's not a lot which is visible. A lot of flood control projects is digging a hole in the ground and putting pipes in or something, sometimes building dams and stuff like that, which when you're done, it's all underwater. So you don't even see it, right? That's why it's such a choice target.
Yeah.
Plus, it's obviously, I'm told there was a master plan for it after Typhoon Yolanda. But that plan obviously hasn't been implemented very well. You know, flood control is very, very tricky. It's not, it's not,
Yeah.
it requires rather advanced engineering to know what you're doing.
Is that so? Kasi I saw a video of yung asawa ni yung Sarah with H. Kanina lang sabi niya, hindi ako nag-aaral ng engineering pero kasi nakausap ko yung mga welders, yung mga ganon. Yung mga engineers, nag-aaral-aral lang ng mathematics yan. Ito talagang kaya natin gawin. Ako lang mismo. So you have these contractors, whatever you want to call it. A lot of them actually even have no background in engineering whatsoever. And are doing mumbo jumbo projects seemingly. But I mean, speaking of the flood control project, is this the tip of the iceberg or is this half of the iceberg when it comes to the corruption problem in the country?
Yeah, it's half the iceberg,
Half
I
the
would say.
iceberg, yeah.
But you know, infrastructure in general is shot through with corruption. You know, there's a lot of, for instance, kalokohan. Okay, my favorite is the Pantaleon Bridge. No, that one is a Chinese grant,
Right.
right? It was built because Duterte wanted to prove that the Chinese are our friends, right?
Right.
There was a perfectly good bridge there already, okay? And it worked. It worked fine. It wasn't deteriorating or whatever. And, you know, they tore it down and replaced it. That bridge, by the way, was a grant from the government of Austria.
Oh,
Okay?
wow.
So they tore it down and replaced it with a bridge that is not measurably superior. Yeah, I mean, engineering wise, okay, it's wider. It has 4 lanes, 2 on each side. But the problem is, they funnel into a 2 lane road, so it creates a bottleneck, right? Engineering, you know that basically, if you want to improve throughput, you want to improve flow, you address the bottlenecks, not the width of the pipe,
Yeah.
right? And that's something that was basically ignored. So at the end of the day, it was a useless project, right?
Well, worse than
Some,
useless, right?
some,
Because it created traffic, a lot of money came in. I think the Chinese even brought their own workers. But you're right, yung
yeah,
idea na luluwang tapos biglang maging masikip. I mean, it's just so ridiculous.
yeah. And then the Binondo Intramuros Bridge is another one.
Yeah.
That one is really useless. Nobody uses it. You know, there's just rarely any traffic on it. It is the most expensive bridge ever built in the Philippines by length. The price per meter of that bridge is actually the most expensive. Again, it was a
Do you have an
Chinese grant.
estimate? Do you have a guesstimate? Ano yung, are we talking millions of dollars here? Like,
Yeah.
wow, so
But
golden
I don't
golden
remember the
bridge.
exact figure. What?
Golden bridge nga. So
Yeah,
totoo pala
I
yung
don't
golden
remember the
era
exact.
of bilateral relations with China. But Apa, I'll say something interesting on this, right? So I always try to be really safe, and I coined the term pledge trap, right? Sabi ko walang debt trap kasi wala rin masyadong investment ng China, but the few investments that were there are, as you said, Mamo Jumbo. But to be fair, and I think Ronald was the first one who kind of elucidate on this in public. Sabi niya, ang problema kasi, ba't yung mga Chinese, malabo daw kausap yung mga Duterte admin people. There were even people pretending to be governors of Visayas, positions that never existed. Now we're beginning to realize hindi lang pala hindi lang pala may fake na mayor na Chinese pala, meron din pala naging rear admiral pa sa Philippine Coast. In short, it was such a gallery of rogues during Duterte administration. The Chinese are telling me, your guys were so unreliable, we didn't know what to do. So we really didn't bring our A game because you guys were basically a bunch of clowns in the Duterte administration. A lot of them were just there to juice us out. At hindi naman na syunga yung mga Chinese, but they're smart. Diba? Like if they see you're trying to shake them down or something, they're gonna also be a little bit more, circumspect about it. So ako, honestly, I rather believe the Chinese over the Duterte people. I think in the hierarchy of sinong mas dodgy. I would say the Duterte people are the most dodgy out there. But I'm glad you mentioned the Binondo one because the Chinese ambassador is very proud of that, right? He keeps on saying that's a symbol of our bilateral relationship, blah, blah, blah. But I'm sure deep inside they're quite embarrassed by how things went wayward during the Duterte administration. But I want to also go back to this discourse on corruption. Yeah, please, you wanted to add something, Apa?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the
Please,
mechanics of
please, please,
corruption
please.
and how it works, right? Typically, so there's a project, right? Somebody comes up with this idea, let's do this thing, let's build this thing, bridge, road, whatever, okay? And there's supposed to be a procurement process, bidding, and all of this stuff, right? But what happens is that the, you know, the officials involved,
Right.
let's say they'll talk to the contract. The contractor says this will cost 500 million. Okay, so the official will say, okay, make it 1 billion,
Mm-hmm.
and then you and I will split the
Difference.
the
Yeah.
500.
Yeah, yeah.
Diba? That's how it works. That's the basic mechanics of corruption. So it's overpricing, basically.
Yeah.
And they rig the bids so that this bidder will win, and they get their piece of the action.
I want to go back to this because like I've been all around the region and all. I remember in Malaysia there's a term Mr. 20%, right? Yeah, like a certain prime minister, I don't want to mention this, buhay pa yan, na may 20% cut daw sila. Lumala pa dun sa isang protege niya, yung asawa daw niya may cut din na pinakamaraming Hermes collection in the world. I think people can guess who I'm talking. So you go across the region, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, grabe yung corruption problems, so what makes the Philippines so special?
They have corruption problems, pero grabe dito sa Pilipinas.
Yun nga, what makes it so special here? That's what I want to ask, yeah.
Yeah, that 20% became 60%.
That's what Mayor Magalong says, right? Halos walang natira sa mga proyekto, in fairness to him.
Yeah. Naging 60% yan. And up to 60%. But that's the general trend of these things. And invariably, it's one of two things. It's infrastructure and ayuda.
Ayun.
Huh? That ayuda after Yolanda, that's when, there are so many barangay captains there who created non-existent people and just pocketed the ayuda.
So ghost projects, ghost employees, and ghost beneficiaries.
Yeah.
We have creative politicians, right? We have the research and development department of our political dynasties is this also because in many ways our system is almost completely captured by political dynasties in ways I think there's no parallel. I mean, we had our friends from España, Latin America experts on this show the other year and sabi na even compared to other Latin American countries, forget about Spain, it's EU member already. But they don't have this level of concentration of power in the hands of a few families, right? Like you go to Congress, 80% at least may kinalaman sa dynasty. Do you think the dynastic politics also has an effect on this? Hindi lang contractors. Like it kind of feeds off on each other, parasitic kind of cycle.
I have an unpopular personal opinion.
Go ahead. I like unpopulars.
Dynasties are not the problem per se. Okay? In the Philippines, you have some dynasties who are actually very, very progressive.
But they're exception to the rule. I mean, like I can count them with my hands,
Yes,
right?
they are an
That's my
exception.
problem. Like there always gonna be some reverse of rotten apples, right? But isn't the
Yeah.
gravity of concentration power in itself a problem?
The problem is the concentration of power in local government. We thought once upon a time that devolving more power to the local governments would help ease corruption.
Right.
The opposite has happened. It's increased corruption.
Right.
No? Yes, local governments should have the power to decide their fate. They can't be ruled from the Republic of Manila,
Sure.
let alone the palace, right? And the the for instance, the issue of the role of the Department of Budget and Management, you know, the way it's evolved is that the DBM no longer has the power to hold these local governments by the neck by saying, we're not going to release your funds. You know, there's internal revenue allotments and all of these things because precisely we need to give power to the local governments. But now we really have to police how those funds are spent, as it turns out, because a lot of them are being stolen.
But then again, that's why, okay, ganito, my argument is very simple. Mahal ang elections sa Philippines and it tends to be a competition between a few families, if not two. And at worst, among within a dynasty, intra-dynastic, yun yung sinasabi ng obese dynasties. Again, this is not about being politically correct. This is a term that Ronald Mendoza and some of our political economists use. Ako kasi for me, a lot of the root of the evil, and this is where the concept of bossism comes from. Seidel, Benedict Anderson, they were discussing it, speaking of the American model, is that dahil napakamahalang elections, ang nangyari kasi dito is yung mga dynasties ay nagko-compete basically for vote buying, right? At magastos. So, kailangan nila ito yung mga proyekto na yan para magkaroon ng ROI at magkakaroon ng sustainability. So, kumbaga, hindi mo ma-separate yung dynastic or interdynastic or intra-dynastic competition from election expenditure and from election expenditure dun sa corruption. Kumbaga, it's a corrosive cycle, vicious cycle. Kaya nga, for me, may kinalaman pa rin ng dynasties dito. Although, I completely agree with you, there are some quote-unquote dynasties na you could even say progressive, right? But for me, if you look at it at the systemic level, elections pa lang, yun na yung ugat ng problema sa akin. Napakamahal ang elections sa Pilipinas. I've talked to many monitors, international monitors from Europe and all. Sabi nila, we honestly have a problem even classifying our country as a democracy because when we go to certain areas, it's open vote buying, shameless. And sabi nila, how is this even a democracy? When votes are being bought right and left by basically one or two dynasties or members of a single dynasty.
Yeah, well, it's a democracy because you have the freedom to sell your vote.
Well, I would say it's capitalism. Like I would say it's more of individualized capitalism, kumaga, rather than democracy. Pero so kasi you raise yung issue ng American system yung 19th century populist corrupt American system. And ako, doon ko rin nakikita sa election may problema talaga tayo lalo and here I agree with you. Maraming local government level may ganitong problema. Now, going back to our good President Duterte, our best president ever, he was pushing for federalism, which would have made it even worse, right? You're basically creating imperial Manila, but at the regional level, right? Like, I don't know, Baguio for the north, I don't know, Davao for the this, for Cebu for, like, you don't want that, right?
Well, you have it with BARM. BARM is essentially, an autonomous body, like a federal state, right? So let's see how that works out.
Well, we had like 50 years war for that, so I would say it's a special case, diba?
Yeah, our arm certainly did not work out. It was a disaster, and the corruption was terrible. Let's put that.
No, that's
behind us.
important. So, ang parati sinasabi sa akin, no, yung MNLF ni Rumiswari, yun ang problema kasi itong mga rebelde na walang alam sa governance. So usually the transition from guerrilla warfare to actual governance is not very smooth, to put it mildly. Ang sinasabi ng iba dyan, again, not to be overly optimistic about it, I'm looking at many numbers, they're not looking good, but at least marami daw nag-AIM, maraming may masters or engineering degrees na mga former MILF na ngayon nagiging leaders. So, again, I'm not saying things are let's not be rose-tinted about this, pero hindi ba at least may konting improvement? I mean, kayo sa business community, hindi ba kayo nag-reach out to train yung bureaucrats, technocrats, and elites sa BARM to make sure hindi natin maulit yung problema na nangyari sa ARM?
Yeah, we're certainly engaging with them.
Right.
Just to give you an example, I went to Basilan recently.
Right.
And I met with the governor's wife, the mayor of Isabela,
executive
de facto
director,
capital city,
Makati Business Club.
and their son, who is a provincial board member. So they're a dynasty, but they are so progressive.
Exactly.
These people are
Right.
super well educated, and they're really really focused on development. They have really good programs, that have been effective. They were able to, for instance, reduce the poverty rate in the agricultural population from around 40% down to around 15%
Wow.
right now. I
Wow.
mean, that's huge.
That's huge, right?
That is huge. That's development, Richard. That is development. It's the most baseline,
Right.
um, number, is poverty level, right? And yeah,
Mhm.
they're a dynasty, but you know, I'd vote for them. They're the Muslim intelligentsia.
Right. Yeah, I think that.
Oddly
Right.
enough,
Right.
th- this is weird, right? Isabela, the capital city of Basilan, is not part of BARM. The population of Isabela voted not to join BARM,
Yeah.
right?
They
So
opted
they're
out.
in a province which is BARM, but they're still under the national government.
Well, I can also talk about the Uys, right? Now Zambong, wala na yung mga halosos talaga na ano sila, no? Also very progressive. Sa Dipolog, for instance. So we have a lot of friends who were active during the recent elections, helping really. Ito yung mga noble oblige, no? Yung mga quote-unquote dynasties na may sense of obligation to their communities and all, and a lot of them have younger generation. Yung iba nakita ko sa Australia, nag-aaral abroad, so talagang magagaling, no, intelligentsia rin eh, hindi lang dynasty eh. And I think it's inevitable to have it in certain phases of development, this kinds of progressive, dynamic, kind of a locomotive of growth dynasties. Pero ako feeling ko, if you zoom out and look at the overall picture, just the concentration looks to me like a monopolistic market, right? Market failure. Di ba? It's like we don't have a perfect competition, right? So it's not even capitalism, it's not even democracy. It's an oligopolistic situation. But the reason I'm talking about this is because usually pag pinag-usapan ng corruption, it's very moralistic, it's very Catholic, right? Because Catholic country tayo, majority ka. So what is your sense of approaching this from a kind of a moralistic standpoint? Because of course corruption is evil. Ang concern ko lang dito is when we talk of it from a fundamentally moralistic standpoint, we tend to miss yung etong fundamental institutional issues, yung incentive systems, kasi ang mahal ng election. So you might miss a lot of other ways to solve this na hindi mo makikita dahil moralistic yung point of view mo. Again, there's nothing wrong with morality. I'm all for 100% for morality. I'm just saying it's not like these politicians we have came from another country. Kasama po natin sila. And at the same time, I also don't like this Orientalist idea, ang Pilipino, nasa ano natin na napaka... I don't agree with that. Because, I see a lot of Filipinos very successful and professional when they are in actually countries with proper institutions, right? So, that's why I want to talk about corruption, but I want to talk about corruption in a way that actually has an institutional solution to it. But then again, this is my perspective. Maybe I'm a bit too academic about it. How does the business community look at it?
Well, certainly not moralistically.
Sure.
I for one, I don't think I'm qualified to analyze this from a moralistic perspective.
Right.
I'm not a moralist. I don't want to. Certainly, I don't want to impose my values on other people, if they're religious or moral values. I think maybe a better people to ask would be the CBCP,
Right.
the Catholic Bishops Conference of the Philippines, and PBSP, where the CBCP plays a big role. No, the Philippine Business for Social Progress, because they do look at these things to some extent moralistically. From the business community standpoint, we look at it from a utilitarian and developmental
Right.
perspective. Okay, basically, is this efficient, and is it good for development? You know, obviously the answer in both cases is no. Corruption is very inefficient use of resources, and you know the development targets are not even addressed. You know, I mean, flood control is a development issue.
Right.
For instance, agriculture suffers a lot during floods. So, you know, you want to safeguard people's crops. You need flood control, right?
Right.
And it's really,
Efficiency, productivity
you
issue,
know,
yeah.
it's really a key
Si
issue.
Apa Ongpin, Makati Business
But
Club, Executive Director.
you know, going back to the issue of corruption in development, I guess we have to look at the overall result, right? The overall result of this thing, and the overall result is that it retards development, it slows development, it's an obstacle to development.
Having said that, so what are the solutions we're looking at here aside from moral suasion and saying demonyo lahat ng mga politiko na to, lahat sila, I mean, mga impyerno, which is, I think they deserve it definitely. But beyond that, like, what can we do to shake off this, to make the system a little bit more efficient?
One of the things that the Makati Business Club and the Philippine Budget Watch Coalition is doing is we are really closely examining the evolution and development of the 2026 budget.
Right.
We learned our lessons from the 2025. Maraming magic ang nangyari. And
Yung mga insertions, mga ayuda.
some of our resource people, some of whom include former heads of DBM and Babe Singson, who was head of DPWH,
Right.
they've told us, the insertions don't happen just in the bicameral.
Yeah.
Sabi nila. It starts from the beginning. There's people out there who are inserting things into the National Expenditure Plan, the NEP, right?
So you mean from executive pa lang na may
Yes. Yes.
So that nullifies Senator Lacson's proposal to take it as it is without any insertions or interventions. So you're saying is rotten na yung apple by the time it's out.
Yeah. That's what we're being told.
Interesting.
So we have to look at that, right?
Correct.
The NEP, as submitted to the DBM and then to Congress, right, already already has certain insertions and stuff in it, right? The good thing about the NEP is that it still preserves the constitutionally mandated proportions, that most money is gonna go to education and
Right.
then to
Although that's also
so-
contested, di ba? Justice Carpio, Cello, they contested na if you count it properly, na-violate yung provision na yan on education spending. But what you're saying is that marami na mga kalokohan nangyari before ito ay nasubmit pa sa BICAM, di ba? Because now everyone's focusing on opening up the BICAM to transparency.
Yeah. A little kalokohan did happen. A lot of the funds that were supposed to be for education were given to things like the Philippine Military Academy,
Yeah.
the Police Academy, all of these things, which strictly speaking are not education for the public, certainly.
Right.
It's for the military and the police. So,
Security
yan,
spending
ano yan?
siya.
Alam namin yun, We know about those kinds of insertions. They were taken away from education and given to these other sectors. So, yeah, we're gonna do our best to scrutinize it, but it's huge. It's huge, and we don't have necessarily the manpower to do this. We're also going to do an effort to scrutinize flood control in particular by mobilizing civilian volunteers to just verify if this project occurred. Very, very simple. Nagkaroon ba ng construction dito? Ginawa ba itong di ba? This is the job of the Commission on Audit, but obviously they're swamped. they
Or
can't
even
do that.
compromise, di ba? There are reports na yung asawa ng isang COA commissioner, medyo involved na rin sa mga kababalakan. So, kahapon we just had Heidi Mendoza on the show saying also fiscal autonomy is very important, and nape-pressure minsan yung mga COA appointees sa mga legislators na ayaw nila yung mga nangyayari. So, unfortunately, who guards the guardians, right? Or who makes sure the guardians are protected enough themselves, right? To do their job. So, having said that, what is the way forward, APA? An independent people's commission, Soto is talking about. Should we hope that the next ombudsman comes in and makes big moves? How do you see the way forward in terms of mitigating corruption? Especially itong floodgate open, the flood control.
Yeah. Well, we are proposing several solutions. No?
Right, multiple.
So this is what we're doing for the budget. Scrutiny, transparency. If somebody's going to make insertions, we're going to say, hey, the guy making these insertions is this guy.
Right.
And that the closed door bicameral, no way.
So,
We were
contact
not-
tracing, nagka-contact tracing.
Yeah. Now, also, as far as the business community is concerned, a big focus of corruption is the Bureau of Internal Revenue and the Bureau of Customs. That's what we have to deal with, right? And we're proposing solutions to these things, no? Because, no matter what, these things scare off investors, and there are several people who have already pulled out because they can't deal with it. In terms of infrastructure, one of the things that we want to propose is that we encourage the big contractors, the DMCIs of this world.
Right.
We make it attractive for them to do these projects. Right now, it's not attractive for them. DMCI is not going to get involved in this flood control shit. It's all dirty. It's
Right.
they don't want to get their hands dirty doing this stuff.
So may stigma na talaga itong sector na to. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Correct.
Why do you think you don't get people like DMCI putting in bids?
Yeah.
Because these guys, they're all about efficiency, and corruption is just not efficient. I mean, they'll make a profit. I believe you me.
Yeah.
But they will make that profit by controlling their costs and delivering, quality.
In the
And
sectors they already have
Belong-
captured or
Huh?
been dominant in. So in short, the low lives are the ones going to this flood control mumbo jumbo. Is that how? These are the grifters?
Yeah, I mean, you saw the list of contractors. You don't see DMCI,
Right.
you don't see EEI, you don't see FF Cruz,
Right.
you don't see any of these people. Because, why would they bother?
Yeah.
First of all, it's small potatoes for them. Huh?
Yeah.
These guys do much bigger projects. But sana, we could have firms with this kind of integrity doing these projects.
So PPP? You're looking at PPP? Like
No. I don't want PPP. I want it to be attractive for these guys because they won't have to deal with all of the dirt, and they can do this as a legitimate project.
So how do you see that going on? So like clean it up and then bring in the big guys, or the big guys can already help with cleaning this up and taking out all the grifters who have been parasitical in this sector?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what the solution is at this point. But that's sort of the goal, right? Is to bring in, really reputable people to do this kind of work. It it would take a huge amount of investment on their part, not just in manpower, but in terms of resources and equipment and so on and so forth. So it has to be attractive for them. But yeah, I mean, basically, you have to pay for integrity. But at the same time, you know, um, we're paying much more for lack of integrity.
I see. I see. So you have to clean it up so that the pros come in, basically, right? The league has been taken over by the goons, diba? I want to go to the second part of our discussion, and I hope this is just beginning of a long series of conversations, just with because ang dami nangyari. There are many things we can discuss. Let's talk about BBM because the last time we discussed, we met in person. I'm not going to go into details. We foresaw the return of the Marcoses, basically, right? I mean, just to put it mildly, right? So here we are, 2025, against the grain of everything we have witnessed, the unit team, the falling apart of the unit team, all of these scandals, anomalies, and the ongoing, broha over General Torres' perfunctory dismissal. Nevertheless, it looks like many people who I would have expected to be more critical seem to say, well, BBM is not perfect, but he turned out way better than many people expected, better than his dad and better than Tatay Digong. I mean, why do you think so? Or is that rather am I correctly reading the room here?
Um, well, I think that's a fair assessment. That I mean that people think that,
Yeah.
right? Of course, one of the things is that Duterte lowered the bar so much, right? He was a stupid, foul-mouthed, incompetent, and apparently very, very corrupt, right? And he massacred people. So could it get any worse than that? Really? No. And yet he had such huge popular support that he got away with everything. Well, until
Until he
until the
didn't,
case.
and it took a Marcos like to deliver him, to archive him. Yeah, like people are saying, isn't it interesting? It took a Marcos to archive Duterte at the ICC. It took a Marcos to at least create this democratic space that allows for us to have this discussion. Whatever you want to call it, pink movement, progressive movement, liberal movement, whatever. They're having some room to maneuver, some breathing space. I mean, this is Leila de Lima saying it. I mean, I think this is Trillanes saying it. People who were the number one victims of Duterte's crackdown. The media is a little bit breathing more than it used to during Duterte time.
Yeah, yeah.
Why do you think so? Is it because Marcos is a bit concerned that he doesn't want to come off as a Marcos, therefore he's a bit shackled by that shadow of his father's legacy? Is it because Marcos is just chill? He's a nice guy, quote unquote. I mean, what do you think explains this relatively sanguine situation?
Um, I think part of the explanation is that he is conscious of legacy, right? And he needs to prove that he's, a valid leader with good governance, right? Yeah, I guess in part to scrub the Marcos name, but you know, he is, whether you like it or not, he is a good leader. One aspect of this is borrowed from his father. He has very good people. Okay, we really like the
Around him,
cabinet.
right? Around him, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We really like the cabinet, and we feel that many of them are the best qualified people, and they're doing a good job. That's one of the things that his father was really good at. He really picked
Yung ace
winners.
team, yung ace, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, say what you like about Virata, that he was a deodorant for Marcos or whatever. He was a great prime minister.
Or
He,
even
he,
Jerry
he
Sikat, di ba? I mean, these were bright people, yeah.
well, Jerry Sikat, you know, and Marcos got the best, and his son has also gotten very, very good people. Sani Angara, Secretary of Education, brilliant.
Yeah. Ronald Mendoza is USEC, I think, in education now, if I'm not mistaken, right? A lot of his USECs are really top caliber people. Stephen, I think he's in Maharlika Fund now, right? I'm gonna have him next week also on this show. So there are a couple of very high caliber people who joined the Marcos admin.
Viewpoint.
Yeah, exactly. Why do you think so? They're joining this admin. Hindi ba dapat may reputational risk?
He had a hard time finding a finance secretary, I'll tell you that.
Well, the guy backed out last time I checked. The BDO
Yeah,
guy didn't want to join.
yeah. No, nobody wanted to do
Yeah,
this. So,
yeah,
I guess it took some intense personal and political pressure, right?
yeah.
Let's not forget the role of the first lady. Huh? The first lady is really a a power in this scenario, and she personally recruited a lot of those cabinet secretaries.
Oh, so you subscribe? Because for me, I feel that's kind of like a. I'm not saying you're misogynist, but it's kind of this kind of trope of the woman behind the throne. But I mean, BBM himself has good sensibilities, right? It's not like he's a neophyte. You have pictures of him with Mao Zedong in 1974-75, normalizing bilateral relations as the heir apparent. I mean, this is a guy who has been among the elites of the world. He has seen the world. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, no,
he's not new to
I'm not
power.
I'm not saying that the first lady is the power behind the throne. She's the power behind the scenes.
Mm.
Okay, she does not present front and center to the public, but she's running a good part of that show.
You mean
Um,
including drinking the champagne of Chizo Scudero? Like,
I don't know about that. That's politics, right? But in terms of day-to-day management, hey, this is a
yeah,
person who started a law firm, and within a decade, it was top 10 in the
yep.
Philippines.
She's so
You
New
know,
York. Yeah, I mean,
she didn't do that by accident.
right.
She did it because she's a terrific manager with formidable people skills. All right, and
Mm.
definitely her role in this, you know, in this leadership is not to be, downplayed.
So that's the improvement on his dad. Because, sa amin mga Ilocanos, not me, but the blame is always, Marcos Sr. was great, kaso he didn't have the best choice for but at least with BBM, I think a lot of us can say he had a good eye for his life partner. And I heard he's a good dad, apparently. Like he really takes care of his son and family. I mean, he's an improvement on his dad in that sense, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in more than one way, he's an
Yeah.
improvement on his father. Um, Marcos Sr. was a terrific leader. You
Mm.
know, my uncle, who was his Department of Trade and Industry Minister of Trade and Industry, to his dying day, he always insisted Marcos was the best president
Mm.
the Philippines ever had, because he gave me the authority to do what needed to be done. Right? I mean, I had to ask permission, of course, but he said, "That's what you want to do, you do it." Okay, and he was very decisive. He backed up his guys,
Mm.
right? And he had the development agenda, right?
Yeah, and that's
So
why I really suggest people check Leloy's book because he explains why it failed, right? Basically, based on conversation with Jerry Sikat and a lot of people who said, kung sana lang nagsimula ng Pilipinas a few years earlier, katapat natin ng Korea, na-avoid natin yung oil crisis, and I would say most importantly, yung sickness ni BBM, Marcos Sr., right? Which obviously affected the system. But again, baka sabihin, ito naman dalawang Baguio boys singing the hymns of the great man, the most amazing man. I'm still critical of the Marcos Senior administration in the sense that I felt somewhere it really got completely out of control, not only in terms of human rights and democracy, but also in terms of economics. I mean, the corruption,
I,
the
I
decadence.
don't
I mean, it was all over the place.
I don't agree with my uncle that he was the best
Yeah,
President Marcos.
exactly. I'm just clarifying kasi baka ma-misunderstood tayo eh. Yeah, yeah. I'm just making it clear.
I spent my college years fighting
Exactly.
Marcos.
I know, I know, I
You know,
know.
I walked in all of those demonstrations, and you know, we were actively campaigning against him, right? And my father, of course, was one of the people who, you know, brought Cory to power. I mean, ultimately, you know, and
And
then
yet we can say he was different from Digong. I mean, Digong was just no discipline, no depth, no systematic approach, right? I mean, that's my point. Like these are the two major autocrats in our history, right? Digong was like I don't know, Autumn of Patriarch kind of autocrat, yung parang yung Caribbean Codillo, like and Marcos was more like General Franco. I don't know, much more kind of a standard, systematic kind of, I would say, dictator, right? I'm just putting things into perspective.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Marcos definitely was very bright, and he was an intellectual leader. I mean, even from a political standpoint, he wrote all of this stuff.
Or ghost written. I'm sorry, I'm cutting you right. I'm very conscious kasi yung mga DDS, they're really watching us. Not that I'm concerned, like, but I know they're watching us and say, ito na mga loyalista to mga to, or something like. I'm just clarifying to them, we're giving credit where credit due while also being aware of facts. Unlike our DDS friends na one day uniteam, one day kalaban ng Marcoses. Yun yung problema sa kanila, yeah.
Yeah, but okay, let's fast forward to the present. Um, history will judge Bonget Marcos, and I think it looks pretty favorable at this point. He's provided a reasonable level of governance and leadership, and at a time when the country needs great reform in both. No? So you know it's yeah. I mean, he's not just better than Duterte, right? Because anyone's better than Duterte, but I think his actions, he's made a few mistakes. He's had a few false steps, but that's always going to be the case. As a voter, I would say, he he turned out better than I thought he would. I didn't vote for him.
Yeah, none of us have voted for him. And I just want to say, it's the last part for our discussion. Having said all of these things, ano mga gusto natin makita sa mga legacy years ni BBM for him to really institutionalize the good things you're saying, but also to really make a dent in terms of dealing with this runaway corruption, flood control scandals, and not to mention the Duterte threat. Duterte comeback is still a very distinct possibility.
There's the issue of agency when it comes to corruption. Just because a guy says I'm going to defeat corruption doesn't mean
Right.
he has the means to do it.
Right.
I mean, this is so deeply ingrained in our political culture, and the problem is really our political culture. We have a political elite consisting largely of dynasties, and they've institutionalized this form of plunder or whatever, and in many ways have also made themselves an economic elite, rivaling the private sector business, because they use their resources for power, and that is really the issue. Could anybody solve corruption completely? I think he can take the steps, and he took a big political risk in the SONA
Yeah.
by pointing out this thing and saying, okay, first of all, I'm not going to sign any budget that doesn't conform to the constitutional proportions.
Yeah.
And secondly,
Si Apang
I'm going to
Tin,
fight corruption. I'm
Makati
going to fight
Business Club.
corruption and flood control. Yeah, but you know, That's a big political risk
Yeah.
because the center of corruption was the people he was talking to at that venue.
Yeah.
It's Congress and it's the Senate.
Yeah. It was like tip of the finger claps I saw that day. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's a risk that this could explode in his face if it targets more his allies than the other side of this equation, right? Let's talk about senators, right? Some of the senators allegedly even had contractors as one of their top donors and all of that. So, really, last thing on this, APA, as we close this, at least hopefully opening discussion in our series of discussion, anong mga pinaka-concerns ng business community? And is the business community concerned that there could be a Duterte comeback? Because I keep on hearing this from the foreign diplomacy community. They keep on asking me, Richard, okay, one of the things we like about Marcos is etong multilateralism, West Philippine Sea policy niya, etc. Pero will it still be there if Marcos is gone, especially if Sara is an ex-president or someone close to the former president, diba? So I wanna see what is a business community's perspective to the degree that you can say in your private capacity. How can we Duterte-proof our economy or reforms for that matter?
Um, Geez, uh,
Sorry.
this is a tough question to answer. I
You
don't
want to give a
wanna
provisional now and we'll have a better one next week.
want to speak on behalf of the entire business community,
Sure.
but the ones I know, the people I talk to about politics and so on and so forth, yes, we're worried about a Duterte comeback, especially in the form of Sarah, who can't explain how she spent all of those funds, right?
Well, she cannot
That's
explain anything for that matter. Yeah.
that would be a disaster for this country. The problem is that the solution has to be political, right? Marcos has to present a successor that is both electable,
Right.
right, charismatic enough to have that kind of grassroots support, and I guess still will, I guess, embody the values of governance that he is expressing, like the war on corruption and that sort of thing. And right now, there's nobody on the horizon.
Yeah.
Obviously, Martin Romualdez is the sort of nominal candidate for the successor. He doesn't have the grassroots. I don't think he's, they could even buy an election where he would win.
Charter
Right.
change. What if they push for charter change? Is that something that would worry the business community? Not federalism, but parliamentary system or something like that.
Um, that's, I mean, look, we tried parliamentarism and it didn't work, right? Parliamentarism is a form of democracy that concentrates power in the elite, all right? And that's precisely what we're trying to avoid. The elite has had the power in this country since independence and has abused it. So we want we want a candidate who will work in the best interests of the population, even if it's stuff that they don't like. Like taxation, that sort of thing. I mean, you got to take your medicine if you want to build
Yeah.
this economy. And as I keep saying, in the Makati Business Club context, the growth rate is remarkable. We were the fastest growing.
I was about to ask that, right? But in spite of everything, we're still the fastest growing. We just missed the upper middle income by what, $26? It's not like a totally horrible story, isn't it?
No, it's deceptive
Yeah.
because 5.5% GDP growth, while impressive, does not represent poor people getting much richer.
So inclusive development still is the problem, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Right? It's the rich getting richer. Right? So, industries are growing and so on, but we have not exterminated poverty. which many of our ASEAN um, counterparts are on the road to doing.
Yeah.
We need inclusive development, right? I mean, hats off to the president and his team for achieving 5.5% and yet keeping inflation below 2%.
Right.
Um, you know,
I mean, that's a
that's
dream
a
in Argentina and Turkey. It's like they have like
yeah,
70, 80,
that's a
100%.
fantastic
Yeah, yeah.
performance.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, high growth rate usually equals high inflation.
Mm.
That's the delicate balance that central bankers tread all the time. But in this case, you know, because inflation really hurts the poor, right?
Yeah.
Uh, like the recent move of Congress to increase the minimum wage by 200 pesos across the board.
Mm.
I mean, what are they thinking? Because you're gonna give them 200 pesos more normally, but because of inflation, that 200 pesos is gonna be worth essentially.
Well, we had labor leaders on this show blaming your people, saying the business community put pressure on these legislators to cut down on the 500 or 1,000 proposal. They're saying masyadong greedy yung mga conglomerates in the Philippines. I mean, we're talking about profits, right? The growth is not inclusive in the Philippines because there's no proper global manufacturing. I mean, what are the global? I mean, great to have Chicken Joy and San Miguel beer, but where's our Vinfast? Forget about Samsung or Chables. I mean, that's probably something we have to have this more long-term discussion on that. But this is where APA, I think I slightly have a different take. I'm also quite critical of our business community. I feel they have not been as proactive in terms of cutting edge industries. I was in Seiko Museum in Japan, and I noticed the guy behind Seiko. By the time he was founding his business, he was already 50 years behind some of our big conglomerates there in the Philippines, right? So before I throw more jabs at your people, I just wanted to set the tone. Feeling ko there's so many aspects to this, right? This is a jigsaw puzzle. So I completely agree with you on so many levels. But to be honest, I am also very critical of the business community in the Philippines. I'm sure in their own world they're very convinced with themselves. But when I compare our business community to our counterparts in Southeast Asia, my goodness, I mean the things that the Indonesian and Vietnamese, forget about the Singaporean, Malaysians or Thai are doing. I'm not very impressed with our business community, to be honest about it. But then again, who am I? I'm just an academic, right? At best. But I hope you see, because my theory is inclusive development has to also do with the quality of growth, the kind of growth we create. And much of our growth is in what? Real estate, like basically the low-hanging fruit stuff.
Yeah. Can I just say something?
Please.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you. The business community could have done more, right? But really, the sector that needs the most help is agriculture.
Sure.
Poverty
I agree.
in the Philippines is centered on agricultural communities. That's where you have a very, very high incidence of poverty and illiteracy and all sorts of things. It's basically, it's a dying sector, right? You can't have an industrial base unless you have an agricultural base which will service the market. What's the point of making, VinFast, for instance, or making cell phones or whatever, when the market can't afford them? Our farmers should be driving pickup trucks. Instead, they don't even have tricycles. So we really need to focus
On the basics.
on agriculture, and that's the only way you're going to bring up real income. And that's the only way you're going to create a middle class. When the agricultural sector is middle class, when agriculture is profitable enough that these people have disposable income, that's a middle class.
I completely agree with you on that, no? And if you look
And,
at Vietnam and Japan on this
the
one,
private,
yeah, no, you're sorry, medyo may konting lag lang. So no, my point is I completely agree with you. Now you have to fix your agricultural sector, because if you look at Vietnam, they already have a superpower agriculture sector before they move to VinFast, right? But then again, this brings issues like land reform. This brings issues like agriculture policy. I suggest people check my interview with Secretary Kiko Tiu Laurel the other month also on this issue, who recognized talaga ang laki ng problema natin sa agricultural sector. But then again, Apa, my pushback would be, I agree with you on that, but I'm still disappointed with our industries in the urban sector. Their ability to absorb, like we have one of the highest underemployment, if not unemployment rates also in Southeast Asia, which tells you also we're not creating enough jobs, quality jobs, even in the urban areas. But you're right, there's a kind of a backstop here, and this is also the agricultural sector. But then again, I mean, that just shows you there's so many things we can talk about. Apa, anyway, you spoke in your private capacity, and I don't want to take your time. Baka hopefully next time we'll be on a better coffee and energy level. What are the parting words? What are the closing remarks you would want to impart, or things that you want people to check? Is there a study? Is there something that I don't? I know you're in private capacity, pero meron bang pag-aaral ng Makati Business Club? Meron bang mga datos na dapat titingnan ng tao? Baka sa tingin mo, bias ako, masyado akong anti-capitalista. Go ahead, say your piece.
Because I really respect your open-mindedness. You know, I know you have your analysis, but you're willing to listen to all the points of view.
Sure.
And I think that's what makes it valuable. That's what makes this podcast valuable. You know, you're willing to, engage, not only engage and hear out all the different points of view, but, you're willing to argue. You know, you're willing to say, no, I think the private sector is wrong. I mean, this is important, Richard. This is what the national discourse should be. It's not about politics. Okay? It's about development. And it's about, are we doing the best thing for our people? You know? And that's why I think this podcast is great, and it's an honor to be invited here. You know, but this, to me, this is the national discourse.
Right. No, super thank you, Apa. I know it's a bit later than usual siguro, kaya I'm hoping we'll have another conversation soon in person at para mas energized and mas marami tayong pag-usapan. But Apa, again, you know it. I have my ideas about things, but as you know, as Fitzgerald would put it, the test of a great mind is to have contradictory ideas and keep your sanity, right? And I'm more than happy to contradict my own ideas. I'm very dialectical in that sense. And that's why I love talking to people like you. Last time we talked, you were a journalist. Now you're attached to the business sector, but you also think dialectically. I mean, I can see you're still putting your journalistic hat. You come also from a very prominent family with its own history, with its own entanglements and all with the elite of this country. So I really appreciate this, Apa. And as I said, this 1 hour conversation we had, which was just like so breezy, it went by without us noticing it. Sana ano lang to, simula lang ito ng ating conversation. I remember my first conversation with Ronald Llamas. I realized, wait, I think I didn't push back enough. I think I gave the guy a bit too much of the oxygen in the room. No, I'm gonna take back. So, and the rest is history, right? So, I hope it came a little bit towards the end of our discussion, but I started punching back. No, I'm not impressed with our business community too. But then again, I want to hear your side, and to be fair, I talk Wall Street, I talk to conglomerates here, because at the end of the day, you have to. Ang pinakayo ko is lazy. You know, you just read one book and you think you know it doesn't work that way. You have to talk to the people, and you are exactly one of those people, Apa, that I've been meaning to talk to, and I'm so glad that you have shared your time and you have been, I would say, quite open or more than open in this discussion. So hope to catch up with you soon, and maraming salamat, Apa.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you so much, kapatid. Talk to you soon, bro.
Okay.
Thank you so much, guys. So that was Apa Pin, Executive Director at the Makati Business Club. Again, he was talking in his personal capacity, but you can see my mga moments siya na medyo interesting and edgy, and that's why we're hoping to have this kind of conversation. As I told you guys, I do have my ideas. I try to be diplomatic and all, but at the same time, I also push back. You know, I did my own research and I have my own ideas too. But I'm also willing to hear the other side, including mga kadidiyas natin na galit dito sa ating mga podcast natin. Okay lang yan? Sana naman, balang araw, medyo mamulat din yung mga ibang kaibigan natin. But I appreciate it. Baka naman secret fans yung iba. On that note, thank you very much. Don't worry, alam ko sawang-sawa na kayo sa akin, but upload natin yung full version ng video na to with Apa Ong Pin, God willing, tomorrow, and a much more finalized version later this week para makita na naman yung ating magaling na guests. And hopefully, this is the beginning of more conversation like this. On that note, thank you very much. God bless.